Hey everyone, it's Shiloh Carozza, author of The Exile and the Misadventures of Melvin the Missing Sock. And today's video is very special because I am going to show you an interview I conducted with my illustrator, Lauren Fisher. If you haven't been following my blog, The Inquisitive Inkpot, I really encourage you to swing by now. Check out the last article I published on Lauren because it introduces Lauren herself, kind of gives you the backstory on how we met and what led up to our collaboration with Melvin. So to sum up right now, Lauren Fisher was my illustrator for my first children's book, The Misadventures of Melvin the Missing Sock, and she and I are currently collaborating on my second children's book, Bertrand the Bashful Bumblebee, which will hopefully be hitting the press sometime between this spring and summer. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Lauren.
Okay, so I just want to jump right in. Give us a little bit of background on yourself. Obviously, a lot of people who are watching this will have read The Misadventures of Melvin the Missing Sock. So I just want to get like a little background on who Lauren is and what led you to where you are now. So when did you first start drawing, like as a kid? How old were you?
So I think when kids are little, I think like all kids kind of doodle when they're young, you know, on their paper, maybe in class on their schoolwork, like elementary school level. But personally, I think I really like took an interest in drawing when I found that there were like drawing tutorials online on YouTube. And I really liked the Japanese anime art style. And I took up watching anime drawing tutorials, and my style definitely doesn't reflect that style now, but it was definitely like one of the first stepping stones.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So what were, from that point, like what helped you develop some of your different tastes, and like what encouraged you to branch out and explore different things?
Definitely being exposed to other online artists. I remember I would look up artwork of different video game characters.
Really?
Yeah, like Pokemon or or Mario and Luigi, and I would like go on Google Images and I would just search up those characters and I would try to replicate the artwork I saw. From there, I guess it's just been just different media I watched. So like the different cartoons I would watch growing up. And I think that's definitely inspired like the style I've had.
Now, in terms of like growing up and basically connecting everything between all the way back then when you were little and now, is there anyone that any specific artist or illustrator that you have looked to for inspiration, or does it tend to be more just a genre of art that you're drawn to?
I think a lot of the time my artistic inspiration comes from other online artists.
Okay.
Mostly ones I follow on Instagram. And I feel like on a platform like Instagram, you can definitely feed off of other people's creativity. Whether I realize it or not, I do pick up tips from like those tutorials online. Like it's not like I've stopped learning how to do things. It's like I'm constantly looking and observing and picking up tips. And I do want to add, like for artistic inspiration, I definitely try to and inspire myself, because like when my style was fluctuating, because I'm like I look back on my sketchbooks and I'm flipping through them and I'm like, this is a completely different style that I was using before. And so how I've kind of like singled down to the style I'm using now, I sort of was like not really liking what I was making. So I looked back on my previous work and I found a phase where I was using this type of style, and I was like, yeah, I like this. Let's keep going with this. And I just kind of sort of narrowed it down, and I got into a habit of drawing things in a way I found really enjoyable. So that's kind of like one of the things that's led up to the kind of style I'm using now.
So you're kind of also rediscovering your own work in a way.
Yeah, because it's like, I don't know. Like I said, I remember there was a point I wasn't really liking what I was making. So I looked back and I found something that I found more enjoyable.
That's awesome. It's funny you say that too, because I'm similar in the regard that when I was littler, I would have all these little notebooks that had these insanely weird and bizarre like fairy tale stories, and then fast forward into college, I'm like, why am I not creative anymore? Like, I'm hitting such a wall. And then I look back at those little stories I wrote in middle school. I'm like, those are weird, but honestly they're more interesting than what I'm trying to come up with now. So it's like, and you don't necessarily take those childhood stories and make them something, but you can definitely draw elements from whatever it was you were doing then. So what have been some of your favorite projects that you've worked on, like, I guess from then to now, because now you're studying art in college? Like what are some of the best things you've ever done in art?
One of the people that ran the museum in Belding, they had like this children's coloring book that was based on like the events of what led up to my hometown being built.
Mm-hmm.
So like the starting point of it. And it was this thing where they had an entire art class illustrate the book. So like each page was done by a different student. So when they needed an updated version because there was like some misinformation in it, or like it could be more accurate, my high school art teacher, Mrs. Sprague, she's like, actually, what if we have, instead of an entire art class do it, we have one student do it, and that student being me. So she proposed the idea to me. I'm like, yeah, I can do that. And so it was just a lot of going through and illustrating like different historical events.
That's awesome. So she knew from the get-go that she wanted that student to be Lauren Fisher. There wasn't like a question.
Yeah.
That must have felt pretty good, huh?
Yeah, that was really nice. Like, oh, this is like a really special opportunity. And it was honestly so cool. Some big projects I've done for school, like I have hanging in my walls on my room. Yeah, just like final projects for some college work. They have been like by far one of my most like favorite projects and most detailed works.
Mm-hmm.
And it is very, very different than like the artwork I have for Melvin or my personal style artwork. All my favorite stuff right now, I just put up on my wall and I use that as like inspiration later. So if I'm working on something and I'm not really liking how it's turning out, I can always just like look back and say, or like remind myself that I did create work that I did like, or like I did make work that, was actually good.
Yeah, that's so funny you say that, because I have these little things I keep on my wall. So like when my play was staged at college, like I kept a playbill and I put it up on my wall so that whenever I'm in doubt, I'm like, oh, I can't even write anymore. What's wrong with me? I can look at that and be like, okay, I can do this. So I want to ask you, like, with your experience in character designing, how do you usually generate ideas for your characters?
I really like this question because I think a character design can come from just about anything, like an object or a word or even a color palette. Just basically any concept. Like I want to make a humanoid character that's inspired by a frog, and I'll just like give them really frog-like characteristics. Maybe their outfit will be inspired by a frog. So I don't know, maybe they'll have a hoodie on and the hood is like a frog head. Or maybe its outfit is green. This reminds me, just around October, there's this fun kind of activity artists can do called Inktober.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah. So what happens is like they have a list of 31 words. And the words are just like maybe a verb or an object, but just a list of 31 words. And from the word, you have a concept of what you can put in your drawing. So just, I'm trying to think, like the word might be lightning for a day in October, and you can just create anything that's related to that in some way, shape, or form in your art.
So yeah, I think in terms of going through Melvin, I know for me it was definitely going to be a learning process. A, because I'd never written a book for children, and then B, because I'd never worked with an illustrator. But I mean, thankfully you and I were able to go through this learning process together, I think partially because we both didn't quite know what to expect out of it. And so it was, I think also it was helped by the fact that we shared our creative vision for the story, like from the get-go. I will never forget that night in, was it December or January? It was like in the dead of winter.
Yeah.
Sent me those thumbnail sketches. And I will always remember because I was binge watching a BBC program at the time. And I saw, and I do this, it's terrible. Like when you're watching a movie, you shouldn't really have your phone by you, but I did that night. And I saw an email come from Lauren Fisher, and I think it was titled like illustration sketches. And I was like, hold the phone, BBC. So I put it on pause and I opened that email up, and there was this sock staring at me, and he had a face and he had like dimples or whatever it was you put on him. I mean, it was just, I will never forget that moment, and just knowing from the get-go, like this is the person for my book. And I think that the way that it was received by kids just as a testament to you absolutely mastered the creative vision from the very start. So first of all, I just want to like, I could wax eloquent about that all day long. I couldn't have been happier with it, nor could the kids have been. But I want to get into a bit of the process behind Melvin. So you mentioned the way you design characters. Sometimes you use a word, sometimes it's a color palette. What exactly went into the designing of Melvin?
I think basically my first step was just going off of what was written describing like the different sock characters. So right off the bat, I read the description of the characters and I did my best to match them, and just keeping in mind my own style and their design. I don't think I've ever just like, I've never made sock characters before. But I'm like, okay, socks, this should be simple enough. Just because, I don't know, it's like a cute little object. I really like cute decorated socks. So yeah, just going into them, I was like, okay, this one has stripes, this one has polka dots. These are short, these are long. But yeah, basically just like the Inktober prompt lists, this was kind of like that, where the prompt was how you wrote out the description of them to be.
Okay. So when it comes to the range of emotion that you capture in Melvin, because I love how you gave him this little attitude. I mean, that might have been obvious from the text, but I just remember thinking like, this facial expression is perfect for this scene. I hadn't really thought of it, and I think the storyboard kind of hinted at certain feelings or emotions in Melvin, but you capture such a range of emotion in these inanimate objects, also including a vacuum cleaner, which if anyone hasn't seen the story, I don't want to spoil it, but like, how do you go about not just coming up with the form of the character? How do you go about infusing personality into these inanimate objects like socks or vacuum cleaners or dust bunnies?
So for like the facial expressions and the way I draw faces, they're like super simple. Like the eyes are just two simple lines, and the mouth, it's just really simple. I think that just had to do a lot with practice and just over the years how I've just learn to pick up tips from other artists on how to draw expressions. And so like for inanimate objects, I kind of thought about how children like to apply personalities to them. And a lot of the times, like I'm thinking of the vacuum cleaner when I say this, a lot of the times very loud objects like a vacuum cleaner, since they're like, they can almost be startling sometimes, just loud and unpredictable. So when making it, I just try to apply almost an evil, sinister personality to them. And, but yeah, I just tried my best to apply scary characteristics into an object like the vacuum, or for the dog character, something a bit more playful. For the socks, just little charming faces doing their own little personal secret life of socks. So the character of like the raggedy old sage sock, I sort of thought like an old grumpy man that's been through all the trenches in life. But yeah.
Do you think it comes from viewing it from a child's perspective? So like kids clearly aren't afraid of socks, and dogs are pretty popular with kids, but the vacuum cleaner is like, that's the one, you know, like, do you feel that it's getting inside of a kid's brain to some degree?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just like how, I don't know, just trying to see like, if I were a kid and I was, or, you know, maybe the age I am now, just looking at a vacuum, what pieces of it can I like turn into a face? Because, you know, like when you look at cars, you see a face to them. Or like when you're little, you do that.
So what do you find, what do you think were some challenges in creating the illustrations for like a complete children's book? Obviously we had to work through some logistical things, but like from your creative perspective.
Yeah, so I don't think I've ever had to work on a project this big. And I remember thinking, I mean, the second biggest project ever was like that history children's coloring book. But I remember thinking that the number of pages I had to do was like really intimidating. And I also I always lean towards like drawing characters, but not so much backgrounds. So drawing backgrounds for the book was definitely something I'm like, I did, but I'm still improving on.
That's interesting, because I was actually, when I was showing the thumbnail sketches to people, that was one of the first things that jumped out at some of the people who saw it. They were like, I love the texture of these backgrounds. Like the colors were so warm and inviting, and it just created this very kind of like a gather around the fire, we're going to read a children's book feel to it. I don't know how to describe it. It's like you created, with your color palette, you created this atmosphere for the story. And I would never have known that backgrounds was not something that you felt you had a lot of practice in. So there you go.
Awesome. Yeah, I really do like the texture watercolor leaves. So that was pretty fun, just seeing that come into play for something like backgrounds.
So what was one of the most exciting parts of this process for you? I had an absolute blast, in case that's not obvious. But for you, what was the most exciting part, do you think?
I think just the transition and the process of ideas on paper. Like ideas, and I got to put it into pictures on paper. Like from the first quick, simple sketches of how we think the pages are going to look like, and then seeing them finally onto paper, finished and colored and done. I really enjoy that part.
And I want to ask that too. I want to tack this question on. What was your first feeling when you opened the cover, or when you saw the complete cover and you held that book in your hands? Like, just describe that moment.
I was just like, oh my gosh, like it's a real thing now. Like it's something I can hold, and it isn't just like separate pieces of paper. It's all together right here, and all the pages are on it. I mean, like all the pictures are on the pages and the words that go with them. It's all there.
Uh-huh. That was such a good feeling. I remember like unloading the cart. They gave me this big box of books and from the print shop, and I opened it up and it's like I was so nervous there was going to be something wrong with it, like the pages would be smudged or something. And just to see that everything was the way it should be was like, okay, I can sleep tonight, you know?
Mhm.
Awesome. So we're working on Bertrand the Bashful Bumblebee, which is the next children's book that's hopefully going to come out sometime in the late spring or early summer. So about Bertrand, as we're collaborating on this, what are some sources you're using for creative inspiration, like maybe past projects or anything you're learning right now that you feel like is tying into that?
Yeah. So for this project, I think I'll be looking at how I can utilize my style even more or even improve on it. So I think I'll be using color palettes or like referencing color palettes more and thinking about how I can really have this warm feeling communicate in it, because I do have like this vision or this idea of what type of, I guess you could say, aesthetic or what type of vibe I'm aiming for these future illustrations. Some challenges, I guess, would be like in the character design, because I don't think I'm that used to drawing bees, but I definitely will after this project. Over and over. Yeah.
That's interesting. And I want to add on this question too. So how do you feel that going from drawing a mainly indoor object like Melvin and his environment is mostly inside, do you find any challenges from going from that to now we're in the natural world and our whole background is like bushes and flowers and clouds and sunshine?
I'm gonna have a blast drawing those, because I really do like drawing or more organic things rather than just like stagnant, straight lined like environments of a room.
Right. You don't have all like the clear cut angles and
right.
Yeah. A lot more organic feeling there.
Yeah.
So lastly, what are some advice bits or maybe tips that what would you say to any young artist who might be watching this, or any young artist who saw Melvin and is like, I want to draw now, I want to do this? What would you share with them out of everything you've done and you've learned?
I just want to say, like, if you ever want to like take up drawing or you think you're interested in it, you should definitely do it, and you should keep at it, like constantly doing it if you can, or if you think you'll enjoy doing it, because you're almost never going to be amazing at first, and it can be difficult and frustrating, because I know I've had those moments as a young artist growing up. But if you're doing it and enjoying and making and creating things, it is really worth it. Sometimes you won't always like what you make, and that's okay, because there's always the next drawing, and it's a matter of practicing and figuring out what you want to be better at. I want to say, like, always use references. Like, if you want to figure out how to draw something, just pull a picture up on Google Images. Yeah, use references and use tutorials if you want to improve. And it's something you're always going to keep getting better at, just like I am. Oh, and also date your papers if you're ever going to do drawings, because, you know, if it's something you do pick up and carry with you as you grow up, you know, you can always look back on your progress and see how long that was ago. Because I definitely had like, I had a bad habit of not dating my papers. And so when I look back at a really old drawing, I'm like, oh, I have no idea when I made this. Right. It was somewhere in middle school, but yeah.
That's great. I love what you say too about doing it again and again and again. I think with creative projects, we can sometimes feel like that's exhausting because we expect every creative project we do to be the best. Like, this is the one that's going to get published, or the one that's going to be like win a contest or something. And it's almost you have to shift your mindset from putting all your eggs in one basket of each single project and just realize that each single project is a stepping stone, and where you're going might take a lot of time, but that doesn't take out the value of each stepping stone. Like, you still got to give everything to each one of those if you're going to make that upward trajectory. So I love that. Yeah, it's very true for writing as well, and probably anything you do. All right. Well, hey, that covers all my questions. So did you have anything you wanted to add, or anything that you feel like we didn't touch on?
Yeah. So when I was really little, I did make like a tiny book, like in elementary school. And this is where it's backwards, but the spelling on this is atrocious. But it says ladybugs, count the ladybugs. And I made this book. It's like it's like a Where's Waldo type book, but in a really like simple children's format where you have to find a ladybug in a picture. So like,
love it.
But yeah, I remember because in elementary school they like shared a I think it was basically the same thing. They like hid ladybugs in a picture. I'm pretty sure it was the same thing where they hid ladybugs in a picture, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool, I want to do that. And my mom like wrote out the sentences I wanted on it. I remember sitting in the living room and telling her like what I wanted it written on. So it's like 3 ladybugs hiding in flowers, find the ladybugs. But yeah, I just remember this is like a core memory of I don't know, something that relates to where I am now.
That is a gem. I'm glad you have it like laminated, and yeah, that'll
I took it to my school or like my elementary school, and I showed them, or I can't remember if it was like my mom who showed them, and be like, this is what Lauren made after you read out a book to them during library time. And they like took it and laminated it, and they made a copy of it and put it in the library.
Oh my goodness. And just, a decade or so later, you'd be illustrating for the history book. So there you
go. It's crazy.
That's so funny. I also it's funny because I'm realizing like how parallel but inverse our stories have been. So I used to draw these pictures, or I would want to like make books, and I would write, in terrible child handwriting, but I would make my mom draw. And so it's like the exact opposite, because I would always try to write these stories about deer, but my deer always ended up looking like giraffes. So I would like write out what I wanted, and my mom would like try to read what I had written and then make whatever I had written into a picture. So our mothers worked with us and nurtured and made up for our creative deficits wherever they were. So that's great. I guess this is just further proof that this is, you bring the artistic vision. I hopefully bring some, verbal vision to this. And yeah, obviously working with you on Melvin was an absolute blast. So much that there was no doubt in my mind who I wanted to be the next illustrator for Bertram the Bashful Bumblebee. And I know there's a lot of young readers out there who are just dying for this thing to come out. And their first question when I told them that I was working on a new one was, who's illustrating it? So this is going to be really special. They're going to absolutely love seeing you and hearing you talk about this. So thank you again for making time for this. And I can't wait to get it out to our audience.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning into this video. I really hope you found it helpful. Whether you're an artist or a writer, just like Lauren said, practicing always helps you improve your craft. If you haven't seen my video about storyboarding involving kids, go ahead and watch that right now. I really, really recommend, if you are working on a children's book, to involve kids in the process as early on as possible. So go ahead and check that out now. If you have any questions or comments, drop them below. I'll get back to you, I promise. Go ahead and check out that article that I wrote introducing Lauren, and feel free to subscribe, and I will talk to you again very soon.